just. Da-na-na-da,
Oh, it's probably copyrighted. Anyway, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's technically episode 8, but we're trying a new look with this with my friend here who has pushed me to do this again, and well, thank goodness for it. But yeah, we're just going to see how it goes. These next couple episodes, we're going to see how we go with the flow, or how the flow goes with us. Either way. I probably should have shut the door. Probably, yeah. But anyway, so I will not tell you to like and subscribe. So we're talking about...
Subscribe.
We're talking about Dune Part 2 today. Which came out this year. A lot of applause for it. And we'll just go through step by step with some of the things we thought were good and some were bad. We're going to try and be spoiler free as much as possible. So don't spoil it for him, please.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. But okay. So why don't you start off with the enjoyability for it?
Well, in contrast to like Dune Part 1, there was actual content in this movie. The Dune Part 1, it was all set up. I've been telling everybody I meet, it felt like it was the first episode of a series stretched out over 3 hours or so. What was it?
2.5
hours. But this one, there's actually a lot of good content, a lot of great action sequence. But it wasn't just full action the entire time. It wasn't just go, go, go. There was times where they stopped. They took time to develop characters, show relationships evolving and stuff. The only complaint I had about enjoyability was watching it in theaters. It was too loud. Too loud. I have some hearing issues, some hearing loss, but it was way too loud, and it was just like in my ears with explosions and stuff. So, I mean, it's not a movie to watch by yourself in the middle of the night in a house full of people. But it's definitely a good movie to watch. I really enjoyed being there, watching it.
Yeah, as you were pointing out, the first one, I know for a lot of people it was really, really boring. People didn't like it as much as I guess some of the critics did. I personally enjoyed it, but that was because I read the book. And it was actually the first Dune Part 1 was actually more enjoyable than the book. The book is more boring than the first movie. I will guarantee you that. But then they obviously picked it up in Part 2, which is why it's a lot more highly acclaimed this time. For the first part, a lot of people said it was a very pretty prequel. That's how people described it. And I would agree with that. And this Part 2, actually no, for the Part 1 depended on Part 2, like entirely. How good was it going to set up Part 2? And it set up Part 2 beautifully. I really enjoyed Part 2. I enjoyed there was a lot more action, like you said. I don't know if I agree there was much character development. They only had the one character, Chani, who was like in like 10 minutes of the first one, and then, she was in this one more. But I don't know if I'd agree there was like character development.
Well, just within the movie, though, there was. I mean, you saw...
Oh, yeah.
And between the movies, too, you saw main character, Paul...
With Paul, yeah.
...go from this skinny little kid to all of a sudden this I mean, I am the danger kind of character, I mean, that's... You don't just jump there overnight. You get there. It's a whole process. Yeah. It's a big change.
Yeah. Outside of those two, there wasn't much else going on. It wasn't...
True.
Yeah, outside of those two. But so as for the acting wise, it was actually very good. Especially, a lot of people were, including us, we were surprised with Timothy Chalamet. Well, yeah, a lot of us were concerned that he wasn't going to be able to pull off, from going like this dorky kind of kid to being the leader of an entire planet of people. But he actually pulled it off very surprisingly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with all of that. I mean, I kind of felt tricked, honestly, because I thought there's just, with the type of movies that Timothée Chalamet's been in, like Wonka, or Dune Part 1, etc., like, he's always this kind of feminine, masculine kind of character. I don't know if that's the right way to explain it, but he's not... he's not like a high testosterone male, but like he came out in this one and it was just like it amazed me and confused me for sure. I didn't know how to think about him anymore. Like just goes to show don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah, yeah. I had the same thing as like, especially in the first one. I'm like, the kid, yeah, he doesn't feel masculine. He's not quite feminine, but it's
Not
just
quite feminine,
he
but
gave off a weird vibe, which I hadn't really felt before from coming from a character off on screen like that, and it was just kind of weird. But this one definitely much improved. None of us thought he had it. On the opposite hand, though, you had Zendaya, and some people did complain about her, and I will slightly complain about her a little bit. She was fine. I did read that they changed the character of Chani from the books. In the movie, compared to the books, she's a little bit more independent. She's more against Paul than for Paul. And actually, some people are going to hate me for this, but actually, I didn't hate it that much. Some people see it as like a feminist thing. I don't. She didn't take over the movie at all. She, stayed her place, had her role in the movie. So as far as the character goes, actually, I didn't have a problem with it. Zendaya, though, her acting, it was just kind of meh. Like she didn't pop off the screen. Obviously, right now she's very popular because she's a very attractive woman. But as an actress, she's not the greatest in my opinion.
I'd agree with that for sure. And she didn't. It wasn't. She's never had any bad acting as far as I've seen. I haven't seen everything she's in, but it's never been great acting. It's never been something where I'm like, oh my gosh, she's such a great actor. It's always been like, oh, it's Zendaya. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but the rest of the acting was excellent as well. There's a lot of famous actors in it. Although, as far as characters go, another problem people had was with the Emperor. They feel like Christopher Walken as the Emperor didn't get enough screen time, and he didn't feel as intimidating as he should have been. Now, two of the knocks I have on this movie, one of them was the villains. Especially the Harkonnens, they didn't seem as intimidating as the first one.
Yeah, they seemed like warlords, not like war emperors. I don't know,
They didn't feel as calculated as before. And that's fair. The Fade Haratha character was fantastic, though. I really love that. But yeah, the Harkonnens didn't feel as dangerous as they were in the first one. And then the Emperor, I actually don't have a problem with the Emperor. In the books, when I was reading the books, he didn't feel that threatening as much either. Like he's just kind of this old guy whose power is kind of fading anyway in the books. So it's actually kind of justified. I actually would have liked more Christopher Walken, preferably, but it is what it is.
I would like to see them grow the Fade Rotha character more before they just killed him off. I would like to see more of him.
Yeah, he had that really good intro sequence on their Harkonnen's home planet. Oh yeah, that was really cool with the black and white special effects that they did.
I did like that. I would like to learn exactly what they did, if it was just some filter or what. But like the firework things too, I want to learn like what exactly they did for that, what they were supposed to be, because like it was obvious there was some type of fireworks, but they looked kind of liquid at the same time too.
Yeah, and they were kind of in color too, because it was like black, gray, but then they had like purple and blue mixed.
Yeah,
which was really cool. Yeah, props to the VFX team for that. But yeah, the story and the writing, like I said, obviously you're adapting from a book here, and you have to go to the original source material and kind of compare that. And in my opinion, the movies combined together is better than the book, the first book. To me, the first book it's very long, it's very philosophically dry. It's not something I would recommend anyone reading unless you really want to get into the second book, which is actually one of my favorite books. But yeah, these movies were better than the book. They made a few minor changes. It was known for a while that Dune was like, what's the word? it was unadaptable from page to screen, page to stage, basically. But they actually did it really well. They kind of had to cram a few things. I read in the books they crammed. It was the first book was 3 years set apart from the second part. In the movie, they crammed it into 3 months. So they obviously missed a few things, but otherwise, the screenwriters and the writers did a very good job, I thought, of putting together the world of Dune from a writing perspective, and it was a very good adaptation, I thought. Yeah,
They had a lot. I mean, I liked the writing. I don't know a lot about writing the writers or anything. I just looked up a few names and saw. I mean, they had some big heavy hitters behind this movie. Dennis Villeneuve. Who am I saying that right? I feel like I'm not saying that right.
it's Dennis Villeneuve.
Villeneuve.
Yeah,
I mean, he wrote and got. He had a few Oscars. A few other awards he was nominated for and won for movies like Arrival, Sicario, Prisoners. I haven't watched any of those.
Sicario.
Sicario. Yeah. See, I haven't watched it. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't watched it either, but
You got John Space and Eric Roth, who've written famous movies as well. They were co-writers for the plays. Spates, Passengers, Doctor Strange, Prometheus. Eric Roth wrote Forrest Gump, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, a few others. Overall, I would say it was well done. Character development was there. I mean, sure, maybe not everybody got character development,
yeah,
but the main characters definitely grew and changed over the course of the two movies and each movie individually. There was a couple times in the movies where you got like a little predictable point or whatever, like, oh, in like 10 minutes that dude's gonna die because he just said something like that, because
yeah,
but they have to follow certain tropes in order to keep within the writing, what do you call it, sphere, writing
yeah. The writing
style.
style.
Yeah. But, I don't like movies that you can predict the entirety of the movie at the beginning of the movie, and this movie definitely wasn't. If I hadn't read the books a few years ago,
Yeah,
I wouldn't have had any idea what was coming up next, and I really enjoyed that.
yeah, yeah. I had the same feeling. Yeah, Denis Villeneuve. He was he has been known for his past couple movies. Arrival, I heard was pretty good. I haven't watched that one. And then he recently did the sequel to Blade Runner 2049, 2048. But that's a very sci-fi heavy movie. Like I haven't seen it again, but I've seen some shots of it, and it's very these long, kind of broad shots. And for my kind of style, I do appreciate that. Like it gives me a little bit of David Lynch. It reminds me of like in the Lawrence, the movie about Sir Lawrence. Lawrence of Arabia. Yeah, that's what it was. But they're not too long where it's boring. Like it's not like a 5 minute sunrise. It's more like a 1 minute sunrise. So I actually do appreciate that. Like he's very good with creating like a sci-fi landscaping. It made me feel like it was real. It made it feel real, and I really really loved that. And the first one you had a little bit. You had the Atreides homeworld, and it was very green, very luscious, very lots of water, green grass. And then you go to the complete opposite. The entire movie's set on Dune. It's what's in the title, and a very very believable desert world which was created. And I of course I'm a sucker for double moons. I just love the double moon thing. But yeah,
It was also nice to see VFX used correctly and used well. I mean,
Yeah.
you got the Flash movie, for example, which looks like something out of a 3-year-old's coloring book. Just most of the Marvel and superhero movies nowadays, they take it way too far and they do too much not well enough. They had a good balance. I don't know the exact ratio they had between VFX and real effects.
yeah, practical effects.
Yeah, but like everything felt real, which is the way visual effects is supposed to
Yeah.
feel as real.
Yeah, the CGI was just placed so well.
Yeah.
Like that's how you take a big budget movie and use proper CGI.
Yeah.
But
From what
Yeah.
I haven't watched it yet, but from what I heard, Madam Web did not do well with VFX either. But
Yeah.
we haven't heard anything good from that front yet. So
Stay tuned for a review potentially.
potentially,
Potentially,
if
I
you
don't
can
know.
stomach it.
Oh gosh, yeah. I don't know. I might die halfway through the movie, to be honest, from what I've heard. But anyway, back to it. Musical score. Both movies were done by the legendary Hans Zimmer, and the legend he never misses.
I can concur. Yes. I really loved in the musical score how he integrated the sounds of objects we heard in the movies into his music, like the sand compactors that do the thump, thump, thump. You listen to half those songs, that's like the intro to them. It's just a thump, thump, thump. And he constantly has like shifting sands, ambient desert noises in there, little chirps and whistles here and there from animals or whatever. And he places it in there so tactfully that you almost don't notice unless you're looking for it.
Yeah. Yeah. From the first one, obviously there's going to be some similarities between the two. There's the same kind of movies, so obviously there's going to be some similarity. But what you want to see as a composer is you want to see the translation from one movie to the sequel, and you want to see how the composition evolves. And he did evolve, which is what you'd expect from one of the greatest composers, movie composers of all time. And from the first one, you had kind of some slower stuff, but kind of like an overfearing dread almost in his composition in the first one. It was very scary, just like boom here and there. And that was really cool. In rewatching, I rewatched the first one. And there was I really loved the incorporation of the bagpipes. And if you remember that, but there was the bagpipes, and he reintroduced that later into the first movie. In this one, obviously, it was like what you said. He used stuff that was in the movie, like the thumpers, putting that inside, and then this one was really heavy on drums, and that it came out in an epic way when the battle started.
Absolutely.
That was.
If you had to choose
That sent shivers down my spine.
If you had to choose a focus for this album, for this movie, it would be like the overall theme is that we're in the middle of a war.
Yeah.
And it was constantly like building up and then coming down a little bit, but then building up more. It was just build, 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 and then it would break out, plateau, and it would be just, in the movie we'd see some visually amazing scene.
Yeah.
And the noises we heard just fit perfectly in with the movie.
Yeah. It's one of the all-time great scores. Not top 5 probably for Hans Zimmer because he's done so many great movies, but it's definitely one of our favorites. Well, for the audience, should you watch it? Should you rewatch it? I would definitely watch it. I'd recommend it. But the problem is that you have to, I'd say 80% you'd have to watch the first one to understand what was going on for the second one.
Yeah, it starts off pretty abruptly, just picking right up where it left off in the first movie.
So yeah, you kind of, unfortunately, that's one of the downsides to having two movies is that you have to kind of watch the first one. And the first one, like we've said before, it's a little bit slower. There's a lot more character development in the first one, which might be why it's more boring. There's some interesting characters. There's more broad characters in the first one, and then it focuses way more in the second one on those two. But yeah, you definitely have to watch the first one. So it's kind of hard to rate rewatching this because you kind of, if you want to get back to this like 5-10 years from now, you have to rewatch the first one.
You're not watching one movie, you're watching two 5 hours worth of movies.
Yeah, 5 hours worth of movies, yeah, because each one is over 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
They're definitely epics, to say the least.
Yeah, if I had to say, like, if I wanted to rewatch it next week, like, if we're talking about, like, rewatching within a short period of time, I wouldn't, just because at the end, it kind of left me feeling unsatisfied, like there is something more, and from what I understand, they are making more movies in the future.
Yeah, they're supposed to adapt the second book, but only after the second book is what the director has said.
Yeah, right? So the story's not complete yet, and I don't rewatching incomplete things. I like being done and then feeling satisfied at the end of it. So if you like to be left on a cliffhanger multiple times in a week, watch as
I
much
don't
as
think
you
anyone
want.
does.
Well, there's some insane people out
Okay,
there.
yeah,
For you
sure.
guys, I'm insane too. We can be insane together,
We're all
not the
insane.
same way.
But yeah, so I would rewatch it. Probably 4 years from now. That's when I would rewatch it. Because there's just so long. Because I originally watched the first one when it came out over 2.5 years ago now, and that was a good amount of time to rewatch it. And it was actually kind of cool. It's always good to revisit movies and get things that you missed the first time potentially. But yeah, I would definitely recommend rewatching it. Probably not in the same year because it's very long. But yeah, so as far as grades go, we will try and give these movies a grade at the end. Overall, I would we'll grade these F to S. So we got F, D. I'm not going to do D minus and D plus because I don't like using that. F, D, C minus, C plus, B, B minus, B plus, A minus, A plus, and then your S tier.
Do you
which
have
is
any
your
movies
God.
in the S tier?
I have. Let's see, off the top of my head right now, I've got at least five.
Wow.
Five. Yeah, five S tier movies.
Have I seen any of these movies, or are you just hoarding them
You've
for yourself?
I mean, I might be hoarding for myself. I don't know. You've probably seen one or two of them. I'm not going to name them now because that's kind of spoiler. We could do that
Spoilers.
later. Yeah, I don't want to use it now. But I will give this movie an A plus. It's not quite S tier because they did miss some things. Like I said, the Harkonnens didn't feel as bad. And then I didn't mention it before, but the pacing, I felt for being 2.75 of an hour, it felt like an almost 2 hour movie. It actually felt a lot shorter than it did, which is a weird complaint to have because I felt like the pace, they just rushed it for some reason in the second half. I don't know. It's a small minor thing, and it wasn't very big at all. And it's not very big, so it's an A plus for me. Not quite S because minor things, but nothing's perfect. But yeah, I would say this is the fifth year of the 2020s. It's probably already a top 3 movie of the 2020s already.
Oh.
I would say.
I mean, I would agree with that, but that's just because we haven't really had anything good come out in the 2020s at all.
That's
See, that's coming into this movie. It had been hyped up so much for me that I was expecting to be let down just because the relative level of a good movie has dropped considerably in the past few years. So I was like, yeah, sure, maybe it's a good movie, but if you compare it to movies 10 years ago, is it a good movie? Maybe it's clearer, it has more visual effects or whatever, but the storyline is good. And I was surprised. I think this really and truly was an actual good movie. It wasn't just relatively if you take the past 20 years, it was a good movie within the last 20 years as well.
Yeah. I think that's a fair point. Right now, it's considered a great movie. If it was made, 15, 20 years ago, it'd probably, if you had the visual effects back then, it would probably be a good movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, with the low quality, especially the past couple years, this has been one of the best ones. But I'm very glad it lived up to my expectations because I had a lot of expectations for it after the first one because the whole first movie predicated on the second one being good. And if the second one wasn't going to be good, the first one was kind of meaningless and you wasted 2.5 hours of your life. So,
I mean, they wasted way more in that 2.5 hours in that case.
Yeah.
See, I don't agree with that way of doing movies. I think each movie should be good by itself, not relying on everything else. That's what you have TV shows for, is to rely on all the other episodes to pull up the bad episode.
Yeah. That's a fair point too. But, well, hopefully you enjoyed our review. Again, I'm not saying to like and subscribe. And, okay.
Just
All right. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next week for a review of Cabrini for all you Catholics out there.